Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to use the Marvel API with Python to access different information about Marvel characters and comics. So the Marvel API is a very cool and interesting API. It provides you or it gives you access to Marvel's wide variety of characters, comics, information about them, their stories, their creators, things like that. So this is really interesting because it provides so much data for you to manipulate, parse, and then extract the data that is relevant to you as a developer. So think of it as if you're developing an application and you want to get all of this information from Marvel and display it, analyze it, create charts, create information, tables, things like that. So this is the starting point. You first have to learn how to use this API and how to get all the information that you need about these different Marvel characters. So if you don't know what Marvel is, maybe you're living under a rock, but essentially it's a very large company. They print out so much comics. They have tons of movies now and TV shows. So this is essentially what this is all about. We're going to use Python to extract this information about these characters and these comics. Okay. So without further ado, let's get started. Before I continue, actually, let me note that this tutorial is beginner friendly. You do not need to be a master at using APIs. In fact, we're going to use something simpler than an API, which is called a wrapper. You'll see that throughout the video. But essentially, this is definitely beginner friendly. So if you are a beginner, follow along with this tutorial. You should be able to understand how you can use this API and the library as well. Okay, so here's how you can get started. Now here, as you can see, I'm currently signed in. However, what you want to do is you want to come here on the top where you see code in my case, you will have here the word sign in or sign up. Okay, so you're gonna want to sign up and create an account. As soon as you create an account, you will get an email asking you to verify your account. So very typical, it's as if you're creating an account on any website. So go ahead and do that. Feel free to pause the video, do it, and then come back. Alright, so if you have created your account and signed in again, you should be able to see this very same homepage that I have here. Now, one stark difference that you may have is here. Instead of my developer account, you can have something called get a key. So this get a key will enable you to get an API key, which you'll then be able to use in your Python program. So I'm actually just going to press on my developer account, and this will take me to developer.marvel.com/account. And as you can see here, I have my API keys. Now, obviously, I'm sharing with you these public and private keys. Definitely, this is not something you should share with other people. In my case, I'm going to delete this account as soon as I finish with this tutorial because it's for educational purposes only. But in your case, definitely do not share these with anyone. Okay, I'm just trying to demonstrate how this works. So as you can see, this is my developer account and I have my keys right here. I'm allowed up to 3,000 calls per day, which is totally free. Okay, so I can use 3,000 calls per day to call from this API and get information, and this is totally free. Okay, so now you can have access to your public key and your private key. All right, perfect. So now that you're here, now that you have these keys, let's start thinking about how we can integrate this with Python. Okay, so first, what you're going to want to do is you're going to come here. So you can see here py.org project Marvel. So what you want to do is essentially just follow this command, which is pip install Marvel. Now, if you have any experience with Python whatsoever, and you've actually used any external library, chances are you've probably used pip before. So what you want to do is you want to come here and copy this and then head to your terminal or VS Code if that's what you're using. So in my case, I'm using VS Code. You can use any Python text editor that you like, so long as you're comfortable with it and you're able to run Python. Okay, so I have an integrated terminal right here. However, you can use your command prompt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply paste pip install Marvel. So you can either open CMD, the way I'm going to show you right now. So you open CMD and you can type it in here if that's what you prefer using, or you can use your integrated terminal in VS Code or PyCharm. So I just typed pip install Marvel. I'm going to press enter. And in my case, it says requirement already satisfied. This is because I have already installed this guy and I've used it before. However, in your case, this will probably take about a minute, and then you can install this library right here. So what is this library? What is this Marvel library, and how is it related to the Marvel API? This library, actually, let's go back here, is what we call a wrapper. So what is an API wrapper? Essentially, it's a library that someone writes. So someone goes ahead and writes the code so that you can access this API without writing the requests yourself. So rather than going ahead, creating a request and a response and handling all of that information, someone else creates a Python library, they do all the request stuff for you, and what you have to do is just call some simple Python functions. Now, if you don't get this right now, that's totally fine, because I'm going to go over it again as we use these functions and as we utilize the API. Okay? Alright, so let's actually go back to VS Code so I can get you started with using the API right here. Okay, so we have installed this API. I'm just going to close this, and there we go. The first thing you need to do is you have to import. So this is an external library, so you're going to have to import, actually not import. So you're going to say from Marvel, import Marvel with a capital M. So this is what will allow you to access all this library and all this information about these Marvel characters and comics. Okay, and then what you're going to do, you're going to go ahead and say Marvel is equal to Marvel, or you can call this M, you can call this Mar, whatever you want. This is just the variable name, okay? But here you have to call the Marvel, and what you will see is you have to specify the public key and the private key. And this is exactly what I showed you when we pressed on get a key and we saw the keys in our developer account. So here's what we can do. You can come here and go back to your account, and you can copy and paste these guys. Again, these guys are supposed to be private, so definitely don't just paste them like this in a production environment. But this is a beginner project and we're doing this for educational purposes only. So as you can see, I pasted them like so, and this is how I was able to add them. Now, one extra measure you can do for security purposes is you can create a separate Python file. So I'm going to call this keys.py, and then I'm going to come here and I'm going just to copy this and save it in my keys, and then copy this one as well, save it here as well. And rather than here pasting them directly, what I'm going to do is simply from keys import public key and import private key. Okay, now that I've imported these constants from another Python file, I can just come here and replace this with the variables that I mentioned. So public key, and then here I can call the private key. Okay, perfect. So now that I have these two here, this means I was able to save my keys in a separate file. So for security purposes, let's say I want to share my code and show someone how they can actually use this Marvel API, I can just share this main.py file without having to share the keys.py file. Of course, do note there are other and even better ways for you to save your public and private keys using environment variables and things like that. However, this isn't really the purpose of this video, so I'm just going to skip over that. We save them in a separate file, which is as much of a security measure as we need right now. Okay, so this is how you were able to actually add your keys to your Python code. All right, so Marvel provides us with tons of information. You can do things like marvel.characters. You can do things like, for example, marvel.stories, marvel.comics, marvel.creators, and things like that. So what we're going to focus on for this tutorial, because this is a demo tutorial, is the marvel.characters. However, the same logic applies for all of the other guys. Okay, so let's actually focus on marvel.characters, and we're going to save this in a variable called characters. So characters will be equal to marvel.characters, and notice that this does not have these brackets right here, or sorry, the parentheses. This is because this is just an object like so, and we are then going to call a function on top of this object. How are we going to do that? Let's say all characters. So the list of all Marvel characters will be stored in something called characters.all, and this is how we're going to call the function. All right, so now that I have all the characters in one variable, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and print out all characters. Okay, what characters.all does, it requests from the Marvel API a list of all the characters and their information, and I'm going to go into detail how these different requests work in a second, but for now I'm just doing this to show you how this works. Okay, all right, so let's actually run it. Now this will take just a bit of time because we just are fetching everything from the internet. So this is an API, but as you can see here, I got my response. So using APIs, you have something called a request and a response. So you request data from an API, you're asking the API to give me some data, or and then you get the response. Okay, so you send a request, you get the response, and the response contains the data that you requested. So the response looks pretty messy. It's a lot of JSON, it's a lot of information, and not all the information we actually need. Well, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can filter out this information and get all the relevant information that you want. Now, do note one thing. Let's actually spot something. You can see here we have the very first character, someone called 3D Man. Okay, so this 3D Man, he doesn't have a description. However, you can see the list of all his comics. There are 12 of them, and each comic can be found here. So you can see name, Avengers, the Initiative, number 14. So this 14th issue of this is the comic that contains this 3D Man guy. Then you have name, Avengers Initiative, number 14, Spotlight variant. Okay, so things like that. And if you scroll down, you can see there are tons of other characters and other lists, but it's all so messy and you cannot really process anything as a human. Okay, so we're going to use our Python code to actually get all of the information that we want and actually get the relevant information. Okay, perfect. Before we do that, before I show you how you can filter this out, we're actually going to use something that the Marvel API provides, which is the interactive documentation. Let's head back to our browser and let's actually come here. So if you go to developer.marvel.com/docs, so this is where you can find the interactive documentation. It allows you to interactively test this API. So you can see here you have a list of common get APIs that you can use. In our case, we're not actually using the APIs directly or writing the requests ourselves. This is why we have this wrapper API, which is this guy right here. Wrapper, again, let me emphasize what this means. Here, I'm able to actually use just a function. This is just a Python function, so characters.all. This is basic Python. I'm able to call a function, get all the information I want without having to write a request and then get the response and process the response and things like that. Okay, so the wrapper enables us to write very simple Python code, while behind the scenes, they will write the request, they send it, and then they just give us back the response. So this is how this whole thing is working. Now, the interactive documentation, it allows you to test the original API. Now, how can you test this? Well, what you can do is, since we're focusing on the characters for this tutorial, you can go to this one, so characters. You can get some implementation notes, some information about the response. So the response will contain the character data wrapper, the information about the character. Here you have the character, the ID, name, description. You have their comics, stories, events, things like that. And yeah, this is the details of the response. We're going to take a look in a practical example, so I'm not going to go through all of this right now. So here you specify the parameters of your request. What are the parameters? Essentially, the parameters are properties that you pass. So you can say, for example, name, I want all the characters who are named Spider-Man. So similar to the example right here. So this will enable me to get all the characters who have the name Spider-Man. So I can go ahead and here type Spider-Man. And then if I scroll down, I don't want to fill all of the other parameters. I'm just going to press on try it out. This enables me to test the API using the developer Marvel website. You can then find the response. As you can see, the results are totally blank. So no results were returned. I'm not sure why, maybe a typo in the Spider-Man name. Let's try another character. Let's go with Black Panther. So I'm going to type the name of Black Panther here, and I'm going to request all the characters who are named Black Panther. So now if I press on try it out, you can see that we actually get some results here in our response. So again, there's lots of information returned in this response body, but where you will find your data is inside this results array right here. So this results, you can see the first result is someone called Black Panther. You can see his ID is this much. And then you can see all the comics that are available. He is in 686 comics. Each comic has those following names. So you have A+X 2012, you have Amazing Spider-Man Annual, and so on. So if you keep on scrolling, you can find names of all the comics that Black Panther was in. Okay, so this is really cool. Now I'm able to get all the information about this Black Panther character, and I can see all of this really cool information. Now, rather than just checking out the name Black Panther, I can go and try out all the characters whose name starts with black. So you have multiple characters in Marvel whose name starts with black. So you have Black Widow, Black Panther, Black Bolt, things like that. So let's actually try it out and wait for the response. So as you can see, this is kind of loading right now. So we're waiting for the response to be returned. So here you have the results. First, you have Black Bird, and then there are others if you scroll down. So you have Black Bolt right here. Keep on scrolling. You have, these are his series and stories. So there's lots of information. It's pretty hard to look at it visually and find all of them. This is why we're using the Python code. So again, here you have Black Cat. Okay, so this API tester enables us to kind of play around with these different properties right here and see what we can use to actually get them in the Python code. So let's actually use this name parameter here in this characters.all. So let's say name equals, and we're going to say Black Panther. So similar to what we just did using the online documentation. Let's run this code and wait for it. So you can see our response. Again, it's a bit messy, but this is essentially the information about Black Panther and all these stories and comics that he appeared in. So you might tell me, this information is still messy. How can I process this information so that it actually looks better and I'm actually able to get some relevant information out of it? Well, here's what we're going to do. The first thing, let's actually open this back up and look at how this data looks like. As we said, you have this response and there's tons of information. What you care about is this results guy right here, right? So the results contains all the results. Like we saw this here when we were testing. You have tons of information that's not relevant to us at the moment. Okay, sorry, I scrolled up way too much. So tons of information that's not super relevant. You have results right here, and then this is where you have your results. So we want to access these results. To do so, it's very simple. All you have to do is simply go to sub data, because this is like a dict object in Python. Then you're going to say sub results, and this will return the results for you. So let's actually run it again. So now you can see results is a Python list. So this bracket right here tells you that this is a Python list, and this is a Python dictionary. So you can see that now we're just accessing the content inside results. Maybe this is still not enough for me. I want just to have the ID and the name of this character. You can see inside this list, there's a dictionary, and then in the dictionary, you can access ID, you can access name, you can access description, you can access all the comics. You can see here comics. So how do we do that? Here's what you can do. So you can't actually directly just say name here. Why is that? This is because this object that we currently have returned, what we call all characters, let's actually name it my character. So this object, and let's change this here. So this object is actually a list. It's a Python list. You can see that it's a list. Let's actually scroll up and you can see the bracket here indicating it's a list. To check it out even further, you can just say type of my car if you want to just check it out. So let's run it. And you can see it's in class list. So what we want to do is we want to get the first one. So now rather than type, let me remove this. So we want to print out my car sub 0. So my car sub 0, which is the first element in this list, gets me the Python dictionary that I wanted. So following that, now I can actually access the name. So let's access name. And now let's run it one more time. And you can see we have Black Panther printed out. So let me repeat if all of this was way too much. So we have the results of all our characters who are named Black Panther. What we do next is we access the data and we access the results. This gives us back a ton of JSON information, or a Python dictionary that contains all the information about Black Panther, this character. Okay? What we want to do is we just wanted to extract the name itself. We were able to extract the name by using my character sub 0 to get the first element in this list, and then using the sub name right here to actually get their name. Now, rather than their name, I could actually just print ID. So similar here, you have the ID. Or I can say comics. So let's actually print the ID first, and then we'll try it out using the comics. So you can see it returns the ID that it's 1009187. This is the ID of Black Panther. Let's print out a list of all the comics that Black Panther was in. We can run it again. And as you can see, it printed out all of the comics that we have, as well as how many are available. Now, Again, more information, that there's definitely more ways you can parse it. Before we do that, before we get to that, let's actually first take a look on these characters, try a different filter, and then we can start working with the comics data. Okay, so I'm just going to clear this here. So for now, what I'm doing is I'm getting all the characters who are named Black Panther. Now what I'm going to do is change this to name starts with, and this is going to be black. So I'm just going to get all the characters whose name starts with black. As we saw before, there's a bunch of them, so we can just check all of them. So now I'm just going to print out my character. So let's run it again and fetch this data. Wait for it a second. As you can see, there's tons of data again, and it's very crowded, very hard to parse, and very hard to read. Before, we said my car sub 0 sub name. This is because my car itself is a list, and we got the first element of this list, and we got its name. What if I want to get the name of all the elements in my list? So I will simply say for car in my car, for each character in my list of characters, print out car sub name, and this will enable me to get just the name of every single character from this list. So from all the characters whose name starts with black. Let's run this. So you can see we have a list of them right here, and it's much cleaner, much easier to read, and you can see this is way better. So you have Blackbird, Black Bolt, Black Cat, Black Knight, Black Panther, Black Widow. So there's tons of these guys, but you can see right here that we have all of their names. So this is a much better way to do it. Now let's say I want to print out the ID of every single one. I can also print out car sub ID, and then I will just do this with a separate with a comma so that we have a space. And as you can see, this is what we get. So we get the ID of every single one of these characters. Now, let's say I actually want to get also the list of comics for all of these characters. This is very straightforward as well. So what we're going to do is inside this for loop, we're going to use another for loop. Why is that? Actually, before that, allow me to show you this. So I'm going to print out car sub comics. And now I'm going to run it. And here you go. As you can see, there's tons of information again. This is because for every character, there's a lot of information. So let's see here, you have Black Widow. And then you can see here, there's 18 available comics, and then there's a collection URI and things like that. So again, let's parse the information related to the comics. How am I going to do that? I'm going to need another for loop in this case. So for comic in something, and I'm going to print out every comic in this list. So how do I get the list of comics? Let's actually go back to our browser and look at how the characters are structured. So we were able to get character sub ID, character sub name, and we were able to extract these and print them out. When printing out character sub comics, what we had is here, we were printing out all of this information right here. So for this character, this isn't really a good example because Blackbird doesn't really have any relevant comics. Let's go to Black Bolt. So you see Black Bolt here. His comics are like that, and then you can see items, and inside each item you have a resource URI and you have the name. Now my goal is for all of these guys, I want to get for every item inside comics, I want to get the name. So first things first, let's extract the comics and the items. So we're going to say for comics in car sub comics and then sub items. Let's actually print this comic. Let's call this comic here. So it's a single comic. Let's print it out and see what we get now. If we print this, you can see. So for Black Bolt, you can see the resource URI and then the name of the comic. It looks better. However, we don't really care about the resource URI. We just want the name of the comic itself. So how do we do that? Simply, we just come here and we'll just print out comic sub name. And let's run it. And now, as you can see, you have Black Bolt, then you have a list of all his comics. It's very nice, it's very neat. Let's actually add one tiny thing left, which is a separator for each character. This way we're able to distinguish the different characters from each other. Let's run this. And we come here, you can see Blackbird, no comics, then a separator. then Black Bolt and a list of all his comics, and then you can see another separator and then another version of Black Bolt. Then you can see separator, Black Cat and a list of all her comics and things like that. Okay, so using this small amount of Python lines of code, we were able to extract these characters and their information, so which comics they appeared in. I can do the same for another example. Rather than Black, let's get all the characters whose name starts with Captain. So you have Captain America, Captain Britain, Captain Marvel, things like that. So let's actually run it, and you can see you have Captain America and a list of all his comics. You have other versions of Captain America as well. You have Captain Britain. There's so much more. So if you scroll down, you can see for every character you have a separator between the characters, and then you have the name of the character as well as the list of all of their comic appearances. Alright, so this is how we were able to manipulate this data, the data that we had at first, which was so messy, so large, and was just a very large info dump. We were able to manipulate it and parse all of the relevant information that we needed. Alright, so that's really it for this video. I hope you found it useful and I hope you enjoyed it. Do let me know what you're planning on doing with this Marvel API. Of course, in a future video, what we can do is we can integrate this with a Python GUI library, create a graphical user interface in which you can see all of this information about the different Marvel characters. So this would be a really cool project to do for beginners especially. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.